get in.
Yeah, not today. We get to talk about an inferior game instead. Need for Speed has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. One of my first gaming memories was playing Porsche Unleashed, and being in awe at the fact that there was actually a cockpit camera. And if it wasn't for the underground games, and of course, Most Wanted, I probably wouldn't really be into racing games as much as I still am today. But it's not exactly been smooth sailing for the series as time went on. Black Box Studios, the developer behind all of those classic games, was dissolved in 2013. The series switched hands to Ghost Games, and, at least for me, the magic just sort of died out. I basically forgot about the series entirely, other than the occasional visit to an older title here and there, because every new game that came out just seemed to review poorly. Need for Speed Rivals, the reboot, Payback, all escaped my attention. Until 2019, when I decided to return to the series with Need for Speed Heat. Long story short, I didn't regret my decision. It was clear that Ghost Games was finally starting to find its footing, breathing some much needed life back into the series after a decade-long identity crisis that turned out one mediocre game after the other. The driving was fun. The new drifting mechanic that I fully expected to hate actually felt tight and well tuned. The customization was great. Hell, I even liked the vibe. Heat will come up throughout this entire video as a point of comparison, but it was a pleasant surprise to feel that I might actually be excited for this series again. This ancient relic that's been around for even before I was born finally seemed to be making a comeback with Ghost Games. And then the studio got cannibalized. Another victim of the great Electronic Arts purge. I learned about this fact in a video showcasing a pre-release build of what would later become the subject of this video, which is where I also learned that this next game in the series would be made by Criterion Games. Look, I like Burnout as much as the next guy, but Most Wanted 2012? I don't think anyone expected that game to be what it ended up being. That's not to say that they couldn't improve, just that we went from a studio whose trajectory was on the way up, to essentially a roll of the dice as to what the game would even be like under a different studio. It was disheartening to hear that Ghost Games wasn't going to be developing the next game in the series, but I still had some slight shred of hope that whatever was coming next was going to come out alright. So, what the hell happened?
I know what it's like to feel that need for,
The thing about Need for Speed Unbound is that I actually didn't know very much about it at all before buying it at a heavy discount recently. It was getting shit on left and right when it first came out. Usually when that happens, I decide to not part with 60 smackaroonies, and so I just kind of forgot that this game even existed. That's why going in, I knew that a lot of people didn't like the game. Just not exactly why that was. Well, okay. It was hard not to see people posting pictures of the character models everywhere that weekend. Yeah, I'll get into that later. But that's hardly something that just straight up makes a whole game bad. I say this because the first few hours of playing Unbound, I found myself expecting the worst to happen at any point. Some problematic feature or weird design decision that would show itself out of nowhere and instantly make the game shit from that point forward. No joke, I started to think that performance upgrades just weren't going to be a thing in this game. Thankfully they are. We haven't quite reached the Bethesda keep it simple stupid level of feature cutting just yet. You just have to get through the lengthy intro/tutorial section to finally unlock them. I'm talking an hour and 10 minutes, my second time round, skipping a cutscene here and there and knowing where I was going. It's cool to see that the cancer of long introductory sequences is spreading from RPG and action-adventure games to now infecting racing games. It took enough time for me to get to this point the first time round that I unironically started to think that they were going to go for the "flames make it go faster" meme. Seeing how Jasmine, I had to check my recordings to try and remember her name, kept trying to convince me that we need to make sure our ride is looking the part for the big race coming up.
We better make sure our ride is looking the part.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is a broke person's mentality. I could smell some bullshit coming from a mile away and held that with my money, and sure enough... Betrayal! Jasmine commits Grand Theft Auto by clipping, like, 10 cars from our garage. My car included. The whole story from that point forward leans on trying to get your starter car back. Though it has been modified, I was disappointed to actually be correct in my assumption that whatever car I managed to have by this point at the end was going to be just straight up better. Yeah, the story isn't exactly the game's strong suit. Who would have figured? So it's very cool that you're exposed to it for over an hour before you can actually engage with all of the game's features. The best part is that saving up all of your money in the intro doesn't even matter. 2 years pass after the betrayal! And even if you manage to save up 70 grand, like I did in my second pass, you will always end up with exactly $37,750 after the time skip. I love it when games punish me for being fiscally responsible. I'll just break the tension now and admit that this dreaded moment of the game coming crashing down never actually came. Except when it literally crashed on me 2 or 3 times. It really likes to eat up RAM. Yeah, I have this issue with the game where it really likes to just use up more and more memory as I keep playing uninterrupted. I had Task Manager open up on my other monitor, and whenever I noticed that it went up from 16 gigabytes up to like 25, I would just alt-tab the game and that seemed to somehow reset it. But that's besides the point. The intro was what it was, but at least now, we're in the actual game part of the game. But let's rewind a bit. Out of everything that Need for Speed Unbound has to offer, there is one thing in particular that always seems to come up in discussions about this game as almost universally disliked. And the game shows this particular aspect off in full display from the moment you first launch it.
Gotta be kidding me.
What? Did you... That's disgusting.
I haven't played every single Need for Speed game released within the past 20 years, not even close. It took me 2 listens of A$AP Rocky rapping about shitting before this became the first game in the series where I actually just had to turn the music right the fuck off in the settings. There's just so much about the audio experience in this game that makes it feel like some sort of sick social experiment.
Hey!
Oh my god.
Like EA is logging how long players are willing to put up with this shit before turning the volume down, so they can sell the data off to the CIA as research on non-intrusive torture methods. Look, I know when to accept defeat and say that we're never going to get a Need for Speed game where we can race around listening to Avenged Sevenfold and the only good Disturbed song ever made, as well as a healthy dose of hood classics. Unless they made a game set in the late 90s or early 2000s, but that would actually be a cool idea, so don't count on it ever being a thing. But there is just better music out there that would also appeal to the normies that you're so clearly trying to attract to these games. Hell, Need for Speed Heat often gets lumped in with the subject of having bad music. I liked most of the tracks in that game. Daytime and garage music specifically. The nighttime music is fair game. It at least had this cool Latino vibe going that fit with the setting of what is basically Florida. And some of those garage tracks, dude, like genuinely a highlight of the whole experience. And then we have Unbound, with its mishmash of everything and anything that has a trap beat. Bonus points if the artist can mumble some shit into a mic. At least it's inclusive, I guess? There's a lot of different nationalities featured, which is cool and all, but it was also a bit jarring driving around this American city when, all of a sudden, Polish rap would start playing. There's only one song that actually put a smile on my face whenever it came on, and that is, of course, In Meinem Benz. Certified Nachtbarschaft classic. Okay, so the music is bad. At least the dialogue has to have something more to offer.
Yeah, I was like, yo, bro. And yo, check this, bro. He was all like, if you know, bro. And you know what I said?
Bro.
Bro!
Bro.
It's not just that the dialogue comes off as having been written by millennials desperately trying to fit in with the kids. That would be one thing. It's the fact that I came away from this game in the end thinking less about the actual driving, and more about how I got scammed thinking I was buying Need for Speed Unbound, but got served a yappuccino instead. Any time you spend in the car in this game is time that is up for grabs for some fucker to call you and start yapping.
Hey, it's your favorite manager.
Multiple calls, one after the other, to offer you a job or just to say some bullshit that you couldn't give less of a shit about.
Hey, Speedy. Cops are out in force.
For the radio to suddenly start playing the news and start yapping. For your character to tune into a podcast to listen about the evil, corrupt mayor of this town. The mayor that happens to be their own mother.
Wait. Are you podcasting?
What a twist!
You go back to the garage, and there's someone fucking yapping again. Fuck, you're not even safe while racing. Canonically, the Neuralink must be out in full public use, because your opponents talk to you during races like they're sitting right next to you.
I love racing.
Hey, remember ASAP from earlier? He's actually in this game, believe it or not. There is a mission at one point where you're driving around in this car, and you get to listen to a full Joe Rogan experience yapathon about how he's just a regular dude, and how he wants to connect with the kids.
People don't get to know that I'm human just like them. I go through struggles just like them. I go through frustration as everyone else when it comes to that matter. People just assume once you're on superstardom that you kind of don't bleed. I deal with everyday struggles just like anybody else. Most of the time, a common person only correlates to
And he is just riffing. Like, straight up, I don't think any of this was scripted. On the account that he misspeaks and stutters on more than one occasion.
Like I said, I'm just...
He even commits the cardinal sin of saying the dreaded fuck word, and they had to censor it out.
Even those born with a silver spoon in their mouth.
Slow down there, Buccarino. We're going for Peggy 12 here. Look, I'm not in on the rap scene. It's not exactly my forte. I look at the Denny's Grand Slam video and think it's actually tough. But was he like a particularly big deal in 2022 when this game came out? I couldn't really name you a popular track of his off the top of my dome, though I guess I could now.
You digging in me? You digging in me?
Let's see what Fantano says about this.
I'm feeling a strong 4 to a light 5.
Yeah, well, now I have an opinion to steal. His inclusion to this extent seems odd if you're not a super fan of his, which maybe more people are than not. I don't know. If I was to hazard a guess, though, it goes back to EA trying to attract normies again. It's also funny that he is easily the worst driver in the entire game. You might get intimidated in the late game when you see him rubber band past your Lamborghini in his shitty Merc, but he consistently finished in last place in my playthrough, as he had this uncontrollable urge to just crash into cars and fucking die at every opportunity he got.
Come on, boy. Yes.
And since he offered the most payout for pre-race bets, it was very easy to farm him for some extra money. There is also the fact that I made the fatal mistake of choosing a male character at the start of the game, because the only way I can describe his performance is to call it soy cringe.
Oh hey, the book you ordered came in. Bro, if you ever need to talk, I'm here. I'll be in early tomorrow to open up, okay?
His voice also just sounds completely different compared to literally any other voice actor in the game.
Right, Del, she was with me all night.
Who did you tell about this place?
I didn't.
At best, the lines were recorded in a different studio. And at worst, the performance was probably phoned in. Like, it does come off as very unprofessional to have the character you're potentially going to be hearing all of the time throughout the entire playthrough sound so low quality comparatively.
I can handle myself. This is great.
That right? Let's see it. Me and you, race right now. Winner gets the car.
And it's only the male voice actor. I decided to start taking regular doses of DIY bathtub HRT midway through the game. Yes, that is my headcanon for why you can just change your character's gender in the garage. And the quality was just night and day.
Did I look that ridiculous?
Yes, absolutely. They're dropping a fortune to stop us.
Sorry to say, fellas, but this game's for the girlies. I did decide to keep my cock and balls though. Something that I actually find very funny is that police radio chatter is not affected when you turn down the voice volume in the settings. And I just like the implication that one of the developers knew that everyone was going to be turning that shit off, so they made sure that you could still hear the one thing that's actually kind of useful to still hear. Nothing encapsulates the dialogue problem in this game quite like how it ends. Because, as the credits roll, we get to hear a familiar voice.
Street racing. Started in the street, right? So it's street.
This goes on for the entire credits sequence. It's so long, in fact, that ASAP runs out of new things to say, and instead we eventually get the same recycled dialogue from that mission where you drive him in his car. This isn't meant to be skippable, by the way. You're expected to sit there until this is over, unless you just Alt F4 like I ended up doing after 7 minutes of sitting there. And I say meant to, but I managed to bug the game out by mashing buttons on my controller. Somehow I managed to leave my garage, but the credits remained on the screen and I couldn't do anything. Did I mention that this game isn't getting updates anymore? At this point, some people watching this video might be getting bored. This is a video about a racing game. Why did this guy just spend so much time talking about the music and dialogue? You have to understand that the vast majority of complaints I have seen about Unbound since starting this project have been about this. And in my opinion, it is completely deserved. I saw a Steam review that said something to the effect of, if you turn the music and voice volume all the way down, this game becomes great. And while I wouldn't use the word great, per se, it is crazy how much this one simple trick ended up alleviating how frustrated I would feel at the end of my recording sessions. I went from, that was annoying, to, you know what, this was kind of fun. As a game studio, that is not something you want your customers to say and mean unironically. It's sad actually, because people have discovered new music and artists through EA tracks in the past that went on to become stuff they actually listen to this day. Whereas now, it's little more than a compilation of TikTok sounds. But surely, I thought, now with the music and dialogue turned off, I would have a much more enjoyable experience. Right? Well, I did like the game enough to actually finish it for what it's worth, and I really didn't have to in order to get a full picture of what the whole game was like. You'll see every event type the game has to offer within a couple of hours after finishing the intro, so the only thing I would have really missed out on would have been seeing what the higher tier races are like. Actually, there is one thing I would have been mistaken about. A few hours in after the tutorial, I was convinced that I had already seen every single track layout the game had to offer. I had been playing for about 4 hours, and I was already repeating what seemed to be the same 4 or 5 races over and over again.
It's all the same circuits. I've seen every circuit in the game though.
That would have been a mistake. In actual fact, that was all the race layouts that the B tier had to offer. Once I moved up a rank, I got to see some new tracks. But as long as you're grinding a specific rank, you will just be doing the same races every day and night, which... that was cool to realize. Now I do have to give Criterion credit. It would have been very easy to just copy every design decision that worked in Need for Speed Heat, but there was an attempt to shake things up with the general gameplay. The way that events, the heat score, and how the day and night mechanics work. Just like I'm willing to give them some credit for attempting to do something stylistically different from all of the other games in the series up until this point. Or maybe, rather, I should give EA credit for allowing them some creative freedom, if not perhaps shit on them for not allowing them to go all in on this aesthetic for everything in the game. I guess the jury will forever be out on this one. The character models bothered me more than I thought they would when I first started playing, though I must admit, I still don't really care that much. But the choice to have the usual high-fidelity car models, as is the norm for the series, as well as a realistic-looking world, contrasted against the character models, can be a bit jarring. It was especially noticeable for me because they decided for this to also be one of the few games in the series where they added pedestrians walking around. So I would often be driving and my eyes would just be drawn to these flesh-colored blobs shooting past the sides of my screen. It ultimately comes off as a half-assed attempt at stylizing the game, but I could be especially cynical and make the argument that these character models are merely meant to make you feel like this game has style, when in reality, it has very little. Hell, I think Heat is more stylistically interesting in many ways, and neon lights are probably on the same level of lazy in this regard as cel-shaded graphics are. It also doesn't help that all of these new effects they decide to put in just straight up make it hard to see what the hell is even going on sometimes.
This fucking shit, it's so bad, I can't fucking see where I'm meant to go.
I gave them credit for experimenting with the gameplay, but in general, Unbound just overall felt like a slightly worse version of Heat to me in a lot of ways. In fact, the day I decided to sit down and record some footage of Need for Speed Heat to have for this video, before I knew it, 6 hours had passed. I got sucked right back into it because it's just a better all-around game for me. The way the cars handle are just a worse version of how they handle in Heat. To be fair, we finally have analog inputs for the throttle and brakes on controller. It always felt weird that the functional trigger on my controller only knew 0 and 1 in Heat. You did it, Criterion. You fixed the game. However, that drifting mechanic that I mentioned at the start of that video just felt so much tighter in Heat compared to this game. You only have to play that game for a few minutes before you get to a point where you know exactly how your car is going to handle any corner you throw at it. You knew that when you let go of that throttle and pressed it again, that you would start to turn. Unbound never got to a comfort stage for me in this regard. There were so many instances where I would try to slide around the corner, only for my car to maintain perfect grip and drive me off the road or into a wall.
Drift, please. Oh my god.
And that's even in cars that I had specifically set up for drift events. It actually became far more reliable to just use the handbrake instead, because even though it would slow me down dramatically, I knew it would work 100% of the time. I think that part of the problem is the fact that Unbound's physics engine seems to be on the slightly more realistic side compared to Heat. Your tires leave the road surface a lot more often, so sometimes you might try to drift, not realizing that some of your wheels aren't even touching the ground. I eventually just gave up and just started to set up my cars with track parts and played it like a Forza game, which did make things a lot more consistent, at least. It seems a little backwards that, as I started to unlock faster cars with all-wheel drive and set them up for track over drift, that was when the whole drifting mechanic began to feel a lot more consistent. For this mechanic to work reliably, I think the cars just need to be much more planted to the ground than they are in this game. Or hell, go more realistic and get us back to Underground 2 driving. Remember when cars felt like actual cars? When, if you wanted to pull off sick moves, you actually had to put some effort into them? I kind of miss the good old days where Need for Speed would just kind of let you feel out how your car naturally handles, instead of having like these two different states of driving with and without grip. Unfortunately, I can't say that I'm a massive fan of the whole car ranking system either. Just like Heat, every car has a score that is impacted by its performance. The better your car is, the more money you spend on performance upgrades, the higher the score gets. In that game, all this was used for was to see how adequate your car was for competing in events. If you have a performance score of 250, and you find an event that recommends 240, you will have a very slight advantage. There was nothing stopping you from going to events where the recommended score was much higher than that of your car, and the opposite was true as well. What this meant in that game was that all you had to worry about was making your car as powerful as your money and rep would allow. You didn't have to worry about any sort of restrictions, and the better your car was, the better of a chance you stood against the fucking brutal cops in that game as well. Unbound, on the other hand, also has a performance score. That fits into one of 5 brackets, from B rank to S+. Whatever bracket your car falls under, you can only participate in events that require that specific bracket. Because I guess the FIA is regulating these illegal street races. There are 2 ways you can tackle this. You could check the map before leaving the garage to see what rank all of the highest paying events are, then upgrade or downgrade your car accordingly. Which is a very finicky way of doing it, so naturally I assume the intention is to have a car set up for each individual bracket. Now, you can actually choose to largely avoid this whole system and just have one car that you spend all of your money on, which is what I did for the majority of my playtime. This does have its merits, like being able to avoid the obvious annoyance that is trying to maximize your performance within a given bracket without going over to the next rank. What's that? You want to put better brakes on your A+ ranked car? Sorry. The regulatory body of street racing hooligans is gonna have to put you up to S rank for that one. Like, seriously. This whole system would have actually made a lot more sense in Heat, considering that the daytime events in that game were legal. I'm glad they didn't do that, but it would at least fit in with that part of the game. It's all illegal racing in Unbound. Is the implication that they have an appointed steward at these meetups making sure they have a roll cage fitted? At the very least, it does mean that you're actually quite suitably challenged throughout the entire game, since no matter what performance rank and bracket your car gets up to, your opponents are going to be driving cars of a similar performance. But the system in Heat also kind of did this, just more organically. Sure, you could do events where you completely outclass all of your opponents with your supercar, except you were disincentivized from doing easy events by the simple fact that you got paid considerably more money for doing harder ones. In Unbound, prize money is completely divorced from race rank. You can have a single S rank car that you spend all of your money on, but you will also see A rank events pop up that reward triple what you can earn in any event you're eligible for. For example, at one point my only car was classed as an A rank, and the highest paying event I could see on the map was worth 6k. But if I had a B rank car, I could have been making 15, 20k per event some nights. And yeah, at some point I did start to keep multiple cars at different ranks because I started to notice the pattern, like the clever little monkey I am. Even then though, I really didn't feel like going for those lower tier races all that much. The only times I would even consider doing so is if I started the day or night with a heat score of 0. Because getting into a cop chase in a B tier car is very fucking annoying over a heat score of like 2. So instead, I mainly opted for the ranks that would actually give me a decent chance of banking my cash out at the end of the day if I managed to max out my heat level. Because when you get caught in Unbound, any money you earned that day or night is confiscated. And that, my friends, is the perfect time to talk about maybe the most quality aspect of Unbound. The Lakeshore Police Department. The basics of the heat system in Unbound are basically as you would expect them to be if you've played like any of these games before. Cops start to notice you on the street from heat level 1 onwards, and the more you piss them off, the more dangerous they get. Need for Speed Heat had this interesting mechanic where your heat level would actually act as a multiplier for the reputation score you managed to earn during the night, if you managed to not get arrested. It added a level of, risk-reward. You'd level up faster and unlock more upgrades if you stayed out and reached heat level 5, with the obvious risk of getting wrecked and losing all of the rep you've managed to accumulate that night. However, Unbound has no reputation. Everything in this game is solved with money. So high heat is back to just being an inconvenience, other than the occasional event that unlocks at a certain heat level, which, I don't know, to me it's just not as interesting. Even Most Wanted back in 2005 gave you a reason to have to actually interact with the police in that game through the milestone mechanic. You would have to get into a few pursuits at some point if you wanted to progress forward with the story. There is no incentive to get into cop chases in this game. In fact, the opposite is true. I already mentioned that all of the racing in Unbound is illegal. There's the occasional rare race that doesn't do this, but the vast majority of events have a heat penalty tied to them that is applied when you finish the race, the value of which is displayed when you select the event. The only other change is that any heat you rack up during the day carries over to nighttime. In fairness, that was something I would put into consideration in the early game when deciding what events I wanted to take part in during the day, so that I wasn't too screwed come nighttime. And I have a feeling that that was something that was intended to be a constant thought throughout the game, trying to get the most amount of money in each session with minimal risk of getting busted. By the time I got to around A+ performance rank, though...
Time to go away from these comedy cops. Whoop! Goodbye!
I think the cop situation in Unbound might be the worst the series has ever seen. It's actually funny that they're so clearly programmed to cheat with rubber banding and with how these level 5 bricks can keep up with a supercar barreling down the freeway at over 200 miles per hour, and yet they still ended up being complete pushovers by the time I got to around halfway in the game. I have so much footage of police cars doing stupid shit like flying off-road, causing thousands of dollars in property damage, and just straight up killing themselves that I don't even know what to do with. The only trouble I had with them where I actually got busted had nothing to do with how well they managed to pin me or anything cool like that. They're actually just suicidal fucking maniacs with no regard for their own self-preservation. The one trick they have up their sleeve is rubber banding from behind and slamming you in the ass, which is cheap and boring, or getting in front of you and occasionally slamming the brakes. They love getting in front of you actually, which is great because they're so bad at trying to predict where you are going, you can just perform the simple act of taking a turn, or going on an off-ramp and probably lose them. And if you don't, it's probably due to the fact that they can accelerate from a standstill faster than any car you have access to in the entire game. Oh, but that's not even the worst advantage they get. Oh brother. The one that frustrated me the most by far in B and A tier cars was what happens if you are pursued at the end of a race. You remember how in Heat, when you passed the finish line with cops on your tail, you could just keep going? Well, Unbound has to make time to show you the new cringe default dances they have for your characters. They can't just let you drive away without pausing the game first. So when you're finally brought back, cop chase resumed. As you're set back off at a blistering speed of like 60 miles per hour with police cars now magically right on your tail. They could have been at the edge of the mini-map when you crossed that finish line, and it doesn't matter. Here's 3 cops now magically within fart-whiffing distance. Incredibly annoying in the early game when you might have a car that takes 60 seconds to get over 120 miles per hour. But even this level of cheating quickly became irrelevant. They are so bad that you can just drive in a straight line and watch the minimap as their numbers slowly start to dwindle from crashing into traffic.
Heavy down. Repeat,
He just killed himself.
Sometimes they might spawn a roadblock to try and stop you, including spike strips, which almost never spawned on a road that I was actually driving down. 2005 they had this working. The only time the police in this game have actually hindered me in any way was during races. And again, that's only because they're willing to literally throw their entire fucking life away to pull out in front of me and get fucking annihilated. Fuck you. Once I had a car that could get over like 160 miles per hour decently quickly, cops became a complete non-issue. And once I got the auxiliary add-on that did extra damage when hitting other cars, well, I rarely even got into pursuits in the first place. If I saw a cop car in front of me, I would just ram straight into them and take them out before they could even see me. And if I hit them from behind, I wouldn't even take damage from it. That is the only good thing I can say that is somewhat cop adjacent. The damage model isn't scuffed as fuck like it was in Heat. You can do damage to cops and your opponents without having pixel perfect aim on the sides of their car. You know, it's nice that the studio responsible for these games was finally able to get it right. Well fucking done, I guess. I think the fact that I have to deal with them all throughout the game made it all the more obvious as to just how much of a mess they are. I really like the premise in Heat of how you would do these illegal race events in the daytime to earn money, and then do the illegal stuff at night for rep. It kind of combines everything I liked from the 2000s Need for Speed games. Days were like the underground games, maybe Pro Street is a more apt example even, and nights were like Most Wanted and Carbon. It was kind of like getting the best of both worlds. All of the greatest hits from these games that I grew up with. Maybe it's just me, but I appreciated not always getting pestered by cops. It made the nighttime in that game feel a little more high stakes, gave it like an element of danger. And the fact that the cop AI wasn't completely brain dead on top of that also helped matters in that regard. That's just my personal preference though, I'm not necessarily against how the Heat system is handled in Unbound. If you want a game where the cops are a constant problem, I get that. But it does still feel like a slight regression from how it was in prior titles beyond that. At the end of the day, they were always meant to be a nuisance that tried to slow you down, sure, but there were other aspects to the police in those games that actually gave you reasons for needing to interact with them outside of that. Nothing like that exists in Unbound. And I could maybe accept that if the cops weren't a complete fucking joke.
We're not going anywhere, dispatch.
And while we're here, as a bonus meme of sorts, Why is the police radio chatter in these new Need for Speed games made to sound like the comms you'd hear in an E3 demo for a co-op game?
I'm rear-ending this creep. Search everywhere and find this asshole. One driver, and we lost him.
Give it some more grit, man. Put the mic up all the way to your mouth until it's muffled and some static and radio noise.
Suspect is driving a yellow Aston Martin. Speeds are way over the limit. Code 3 pursuit, he's running.
It feels like every cop in these games is fucking LARPing.
I see the car and its dipshit driver. That son of a bitch has to have nitrous.
As I've been writing the script for this video, I became very conscious of the fact that I have barely even mentioned anything I actually like about this game. And really, it feels kind of like a cop-out to say this, but everything else in this game that I haven't already talked about is just fine. It's okay. It's passable. The overall driving, other than the drifting feeling off, it's fine. Car customization? Fine. The open world? It was fine, when I actually started to see more of it as I went up the performance ranks anyway. The game was good enough in all of the most basic ways where I didn't mind seeing it until the end. If I had bought it at full price though, damn. I don't know about that one, G. The fact that it's a different studio that worked on this game, other than the one that mainlined the series for 4 prior titles, also explains why there are little things about Unbound that just make it feel unpolished in some regards. Like how the screen isn't centered on your position when you enter the map screen like it was in Heat, so you have to look around to see where you are in the world. Or how you can still upgrade your car with off-road parts, even though you have very little reason to do so, since there are no dedicated off-road events like there were in that game. I am not speccing my car out just to make losing cops a little bit easier, like the game suggests you can do. Or when you get one of the many calls about special jobs, and your screen gets cluttered as long as you're out in free roam. Or how when you've paused the game, and you press A on the gamepad to continue, you get a kick of nitrous because that just so happens to be the nitrous button as well. I'm willing to bet that these sort of little problems wouldn't have been a thing if the series wasn't forced to switch studios. Because Need for Speed is a series that often takes years to take one step forward, and single entries to take 2 back. We'll get a couple of games in the series in a row that start to show some level of improvement, before 3 or more mediocre examples. And we only have one thing to blame for this. Electronic Arts, of course. Just as Ghost Games was finally starting to find their groove, they get shit canned, and the series gets passed around like shit in a bag to Criterion. A studio which, just to be completely fair, did take over post-launch development for Need for Speed Heat, and does have a collaborative development credit for Need for Speed Rivals, but hasn't been in the helm of development for a racing game from start to finish since Most Wanted 2012. Which, I probably won't get another chance to say this in a video. What a fucking slimy move, EA. To tease a new game bearing the same name as one of the most beloved entries in the series, knowing full well that what you were actually making was a lamer Burnout Paradise Light. I remember talking to people in school about this game when it was being advertised before release, thinking it might actually be a return to the 2000s style of Need for Speed. Why else would they call it Most Wanted? Surely they're not just trying to take my fucking money. What a fool Young Hub was. I don't remember why I never ended up buying it at the time, but having gotten it for free since, my disappointment would have been immeasurable, and my day would have been ruined. Need for Speed Unbound is not as bad as I thought it would be. As I said in the beginning, there is no single massive point of failure that makes this game shit. If you get it on a big discount like I did, you won't have an awful time. But if this game still interests you in the slightest, and you haven't already done so, give Need for Speed Heat a shot instead. It is not a perfect game, it has some minor issues that keep it down. But not only can you just get it for even cheaper than Unbound on sites like CD Keys, it's also just straight up a more fun, more well-rounded experience overall. I have no doubt that history will once again repeat itself. That within the next 5 to 10 years, just as Criterion starts to look like they might actually be getting a handle on these games, they too will be devoured. Just like Ghost Games and Black Box before them, not to mention developers like Visceral and Pandemic. Cause Need for Speed is a cursed franchise. I don't think we will ever get another game in this series that we could compare to the high point of the 2000s. Instead, we'll get these oscillating low and high points where at the top, we almost get something that is actually great. On the low end, we get games like Need for Speed Unbound. A game that has barely anything new to offer, and actually regresses in a lot of aspects.
What the fuck just happened?
I want you to subscribe to me.
Scav Merchant Hub.
On YouTube, thank you, cringe. Fuck.